Now that we are officially done having kids, I am beginning to turn my attention a little bit more to my physical health. Obviously, with pregnancy, breastfeeding, there's a lot of weight fluctuations, there's a lot of hormonal fluctuations, and it's just hard to kind of develop a consistent routine and a consistent trajectory, if you will. So now that we're past all of that, my husband and I are starting to make a plan and start to implement that plan as far as our physical health goes.
One around.
So over the years, I've found a few tips or tricks that I think can be particularly helpful for people in that beginning stage of your health journey. So first, I want to go over two approaches to timing of eating. So there's the intuitive style of eating, and then there's a more scheduled style of eating. I would not recommend intuitive style of eating for someone who has, say, ADHD. My husband has ADHD, and if he doesn't plan on eating, if he doesn't have like regular times that he eats, he just forgets to eat most of the time. He gets too involved in what he's doing. So that basically takes it off the table for anybody who struggles with paying attention to the time. And then, of course, there's scheduled eating where you eat at very specific intervals at regular times. And that's usually best for people who like work outside the home and have scheduled times already by their workplace that they have to eat. That's pretty much the only way you could do it then. So with intuitive eating, you could do some of the styles of like intermittent fasting where you just like, I don't really advocate for full-on intermittent fasting. I think people can take that to extremes, but if you're doing intuitive eating, I think waiting maybe the first meal until you feel hungry and then eating is kind of a good gauge for that. Or it doesn't even have to be the first meal. It could be any meal, just waiting until you feel hungry before you start eating. And then your body kind of adjusts when it gets used to doing that. But if you're prone to disordered eating, it can be too easy to ignore those hunger signals. So that's another group that I'd probably say you wouldn't want to do intuitive eating for. And intuitive is just basically waiting for your body to signal hunger or whatever. So with scheduled eating, I think can be helpful. But with scheduled eating, I advocate for a more strict schedule. So if this is when you eat, don't eat at other times too. I think most of the time people don't do either intuitive or scheduled, and so they're just eating. They have their regular times that they eat, whether they're hungry or not, and then they have their times when they feel hungry or they feel munchy, and then they eat. And I think pick one is basically all I want to say about that. Pick either intuitive or scheduled. As opposed to trying to like reduce how much you're eating, one of the things I think can be really helpful is to lengthen your meals, the time that you're spending eating. And that helps because then your body has a chance to feel full. It registers that you're eating, that you're chewing, and you have time to adjust the amount as you go, as opposed to just eating a ton and then feeling it all at the same time. So there's a couple of ways you can lengthen. You could just intentionally eat slower, which I don't find works, but an easier thing to do is eat with somebody. So when you're eating with someone, a lot of times you just kind of naturally slow down to allow for the flow of conversation to happen with back and forth. Another easy way to slow down your meals is by adding high effort foods. I hate high effort foods like that you have to chew a lot and that you have to like take apart or whatever. So like salad is a very like too heavy food, or chicken on the bone. I just stay away from chicken on the bone because I find it so annoying to eat because it's such high effort. But if you're trying to slow down your meals, that's a good way to put it in. And also a lot of times, or sometimes at least, can have less prep work than if you're not deboning it, or less cost. So it's like a win-win in that way if that's what you're trying to do. Aside from lengthening your meals, in order to progress on this health journey, it's really important to add what you might call roughage. So like that kind of goes along with the hard to chew foods or whatever, but like leafy greens, filling foods that aren't like high calorie foods necessarily. So it can be just roughage type foods, or filling foods that just are very satiating, like potatoes or whole carbohydrates, whole grains, those sorts of things. So by adding highly satiating foods or foods that have a lot of bulk to them without a high calorie count, or foods that have a real nutrient density, like a very nutrient packed foods to every meal, as opposed to trying to like minimize what you're eating or eat less of stuff. If you're just focused on just adding nutrition, adding nutrient density, adding bulk, that sort of adding is a little bit easier to achieve for most people than taking out the sugar and taking out this and taking out that. It makes it a little bit less stressful if you're just like, okay, I can have whatever I'm about to eat as long as I eat this first or with it. And doing that for most meals then increases the vital nutrients that you're needing for your body to thrive. And then it'll also just kind of naturally reduce some of the less desirable foods that your body doesn't process as well and that isn't as good for you. Predictability. So if you're on a schedule anyway, you could do scheduled foods but either have like a formulaic for one or more meals. So formulaic meaning like I do a rice dish for every dinner, or I do a like sandwiches, soup, and salad for lunch, or something like that, where it's like, this is my formula for this meal, so that it's something that you don't really have to think about too much. You just put it together really fast because you know what it's going to be. It's a formula. Or you can have specific go-to meals. Like for instance, I eat peanut butter oats pretty much every morning for breakfast. It's very simple, very straightforward, very filling, and has a lot of fiber, very healthy, and I don't even have to think about it too much because I know my baseline meal, my go-to meal is peanut butter oats. Does that mean I eat it every single day? No. There are occasional days where I have something else in the fridge that I'm like, oh, that looks good, and I'll grab that instead. Or occasional days where I'm just not feeling it and I eat something else. But for the most part, I eat that every single day. Not everybody can do that, and that's okay. So just like having a formula if you're somebody who gets bored easily for one or more meals, just to make it easier to cook at home. Aside from eating, there's also the physical movement part of a health journey that we're trying to tackle here. So for physical movement, we are aiming for 3 things. 1, tracking steps. It doesn't have to be exact tracking of steps, but like I just downloaded a tracker on my phone and then it kind of roughly tracks my steps so that I have an idea of what my baseline of steps is. And then the goal is just to increase from the baseline. It doesn't have to be dramatic increases. Ideally, you're getting 7,500 to 12,000 steps, somewhere in that range every day. But if you're starting at 1,500 steps, just go for 1,700 steps. It doesn't have to be dramatic, and just work up. And you don't really need to go 20,000 steps. So if you want to, that's fine, but like you don't really need to go higher and higher and higher. Just increasing from your baseline steps will do a lot for your overall health and longevity. 2, pick an activity that you like to do or would like to do. So this can be a sport or any sort of physical movement, like a yoga or martial arts or soccer, whatever it is that you like to do or want to like to do. And then join a team, take a class, or do a YouTube video series on it. And just have that be something that you do regularly. So my husband does gardening. I've gotten involved in gardening. That's seasonal. But during gardening season, we do gardening as an activity that we like to do. And it's not like it's not a ton of physical movement, but it is movement. And right now it's winter time. We're not doing as much gardening. The toddler and I are doing easy dance videos on YouTube as just something we do a couple of times a week. And that may shift or stop when we get into gardening season. And that could be once a week, that could be twice a week, it could be as much or as little as you want, just having something regular that's an activity that you do, join a soccer team or something, 3, short, intense workouts at least 3 times a week. So right now, Matthew and I have added into our routines just 10-minute videos. So we have a few different things that we're targeting, and that can evolve and change as we go, but it's picking some sort of targeted exercise to do. And part of the reason I think this 3-prong approach of walking, increasing your steps, a regular thing that you do, an activity that you do, and targeted workouts at least 3 times a week is important, is because if one of them falls off for a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. You're still doing other movements. And then if you're not feeling something, it's not that big of a deal to skip. So you want to start to build a lifestyle of movement. And the last thing I want you to think about is possibly not doing a weekly schedule. So weekly is pretty easy to plan around for most people, but there are definitely benefits to ignoring the week to week and instead doing like a monthly or kind of seasonal thing, especially when you're talking about specific activities like we're seasonally gardening and seasonally dancing or whatever. Especially for women going through their monthly cycle, I have found I have found that there is like a week that I'm going to be so unmotivated and so depressed, and maybe I won't be able to eat healthy that week. Maybe I'm going to be ravenous and eat really unhealthy, and I'm going to really struggle to motivate myself to exercise. And then usually when my period starts, there's like 1 or 2 days that I'm out. I'm going to have a really hard time. And then there are other weeks that I'll be super motivated. So it maybe consider, if there is a specific time of the month that you really struggle with, plan your schedule monthly as opposed to weekly. And it could still be a loose plan or whatever, but just recognize that this week we're not doing anything, or we're not doing very much. We're dropping this activity and we're just walking, or I'm gonna, eat healthy the rest of the time, but this week is not a healthy week. This is a junk week. So those are some of the things that I am starting to implement now as I intend to work towards a lifestyle of physical health.